Welcome to In the Black, where we celebrate stories of transformation, resilience, and rising into the life you were meant to live. I'm your host, Araceli, and this space was created to amplify voices often overlooked. Women who've come through the fire with wisdom, strength, and heart. Whether you're here for healing, clarity, or just good conversation, you belong here. Let's get into it. Today's guest is someone who knows what it means to lose the life you thought you'd always have, and then build something even more aligned on the other side. Peter Moore spent decades at the top of the publishing world, working with major titles like Playboy, Men's Health, and Backpacker, and contributing to multiple New York Times bestsellers. Then, after 30 years of success, he was laid off from his executive role at the largest men's magazine in the world. What came next wasn't a comeback story in the traditional sense. It was a creative awakening. Peter leaned into a long held dream to write and illustrate on his own terms. That decision led to The Road to Elsewhere, his Substack with over 14,000 readers, and opened the door to new work as a writer and animator for NPR and as a columnist for the Colorado Sun. His story is about trusting creativity, listening to the quiet nudge towards something truer, and redefining success after loss. It's quirky, honest, and deeply human, and proof that sometimes the detour is the destination. Please welcome Peter Moore.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Araceli.
Thank you. So, Peter, go ahead and just give us a little sneak peek about who you are.
Yeah, so I had like a long time career in the magazine industry and books back when there was a magazine industry and books. Now we've taken many turns toward other forms of media, other ways of reaching out to people. Um, and frankly, it was a shock and a blow to me because I've been working so long and successfully in magazines. When I was actually on a sabbatical away from Men's Health magazine, where I'd been working for 20 years, when they suspiciously called me back into the office for a meeting in a conference room that I had never been to before. And I thought, oh, okay, I know what's going to happen here. And yes, there was my boss and somebody from HR to tackle me in case I went berserk. And I was informed that not only was I on sabbatical then, but I was never to return. And it was a stark moment for me, I'll be honest with you. I had worked for so long in the industry, I couldn't even conceive of what my life would be without it. But I had to figure that out really quickly.
That must have been just devastating. Did you see signs of this happening?
When you work in the magazine industry, you you know that you're one bad decision or one advertising downturn away from losing your job. So no, it wasn't exactly a surprise to me. And I had been taking a series of sabbaticals that year in part to figure out what was going to be next for me. So I knew when I signed up for a sabbatical that somebody in accounting might think, we could save a lot of money if we just sent that guy packing and didn't have to pay his salary anymore, which is what happened. But I was fortunate that in two ways. One is that because I've been working for Men's Health for so long, I had a long severance package, 6 months on salary to keep things going. But the other thing, unbeknownst to me, that fall, I had been approached on a ghostwriting deal with a famous fitness guru type. Um, and I had signed a contract to write this guy's book for him, thinking that I would do that while fitting it in with my job at Men's Health. Well, soon there was no job at Men's Health. So I was like staring at this guy thinking, oh, I guess you're my bridge into my new life. And it turned out that it was, and he was, and the book sold for a lot of money when we put it out in the marketplace. So I had a bridge of severance money and also the money from this book deal to really take another look at what I wanted to do in life and what was most important to me. And it all feels like fate now, but all during the last 8 or 10 years of my life at Men's Health, I'd been taking art courses, drawing courses, acrylic painting courses, because for one thing, I needed to escape words. I was writing or talking all day long, words, 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 and uh, I needed to find a way to express myself in quiet, in different ways to tap into my creativity. Um, so when I was looking around, I was thinking, well, I've always wanted to incorporate artwork into what I do. Maybe now's the chance. And the big turn there came when a friend of mine who was already established on Substack. It's a very big blogging platform right now. He was established on Substack. I had just barely even heard of it, but he said, Peter, the kind of work that you're doing and that you want to do would be really, might prove to be very popular on Substack. Maybe you should give it a try. So, one July afternoon 4 years ago, I made a Substack post on the Road to Elsewhere, which is the handle that I go by on Substack. Um, and the surprising thing about it was that as I was writing this post, I was thinking, this would be a funny image to put along with it, and this one would be funny too. And then I could wrap it up, this way in text and this way with an image. And in the beginning, it wasn't like I was an immediate success on Substack. It took me a long time to work out what the relationship was between my writing and my artwork. But once I did figure that out, I realized that me as artist is kind of the heckler to me as writer. So the artist me is making fun of the writer me, in that conversation between words and images uh, started to pick up momentum on Substack, to the point that I regularly get notices from Substack that, again, the number three and rising humorist on Substack. I'm number 88 and rising humorist on Substack, and it's like I'm all over the place there. But some days I finish above Garrison Keeler and Dave Barry as far as the ranking of my Substack, and I'm thinking, if I'm in the same conversation on Substack with those guys, uh, there's something going on here, and it has felt amazing to me. So I guess that progress that I've made there and the audience that I've developed is kind of my in the black moment, realizing that the life I had, as good as it was and as much it provided me with, I still had something else in me to give and to explore and to understand and to have fun at. So, I'm not being paid what I used to be, but I'm certainly smiling a lot more, and that's a good kind of payment.
It's very important for sure. You had what many people would call a dream career, and then it suddenly ended. What did that moment of being laid off shake loose in you emotionally and spiritually, or did it?
One of the things that I've come to realize looking back on it all is that my career was so full of activity and noise and responsibilities. I didn't even have a minute to think about what was important to me and what I really actually wanted to do. It was always, what's the next deadline? Who's the next person need to hire? When is the issue due at the printing press? It's like all that ferocious activity just distracted me, like in a really good way, for 3 decades while I was working as a magazine editor, and I loved the work. But when it all went silent, it's like I was laid off on a Thursday, cleaned out my office on a Saturday, and the next Monday I had to say, okay, what do I do now? What is my purpose in life? And what I've come to realize is that unless your career goes completely silent and you have to fill that silence, you need to find a way to stare into the void and say, okay, it's blank. There's nothing there. What am I going to do now? Unless I had had that stark, lonely, empty, quiet moment, I never would have actually been thinking about it. I might have been on the same treadmill now that I was on 10 years ago had I not been kicked out of that office, told that what I was doing was no longer required, and made myself ask the question, what do I want to do now? And the answer was not instantaneous. It took me years to work through the various possibilities, see what worked, see what didn't work, what I would leave off, what I would take on. But having been through that process, it's invaluable, and it has made my life what it is today, completely transformed from what it was a decade ago, and I'm so grateful for that.
It's a blessing in disguise.
You hear that a lot about people who were laid off from jobs, and it was a disaster at the time. I was just fortunate that both of our kids had grown up, been through college, graduated. The last tuition check was paid, so that it's not like I was, trying to figure out how to put a roof over my head or send the kids through college or any of that. Many of the major financial challenges of my life were over at that point. So, in fact, it was past me subsidizing current me and giving current me the freedom to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And the F. Scott Fitzgerald line is that American lives don't have second acts. Well, I was forced to have a second act, and I'm in no hurry for it to end right now.
Let's talk about your artwork. Your artwork slowly became a bigger part of your voice. When did you realize creativity wasn't just a side outlet, but the thing that would carry you forward?
For all of my career up until 10 years ago, I was so focused on using my creative voice to enhance other people's work. So when I was an editor at Playboy, I understood Playboy's mission as a magazine, and I was in support of that. So in a sense, I was doing kind of a ventriloquism thing, using my voice to enhance what Playboy did. Then I went to Men's Health magazine, completely different magazine, different idea, different readers, um, and I used my creativity to reach the men who were subscribing to Men's Health magazine. So always in my career, I was focused on someone other than myself, using my voice to project or to serve another mission. When it all went quiet on me and I was laid off from Men's Health, I had to ask myself, so is what is my voice uniquely set up to do? And part of what I learned through Substack was that my readers were looking for an authentic version of me, speaking directly to them through my words, through my artwork, and also through my sense of humor, which had been important to me in all of the jobs I'd had before, but it had never been the focal point. Now, with On the Road to Elsewhere, what I'm trying to do is to engage and amuse and give people maybe a little break from the world as they see it now, because it's a difficult place. But if I can give them a series of 5 or 10 minute vacations with my writing and my artwork to give them a laugh, to give them another way of looking at the world, to give them another way of looking at themselves and maybe being more sympathetic for the lives that they're leading, um, that's my mission now. And I feel like between words and photo and drawings I do, that I can communicate with people in a way that wasn't even appropriate in the jobs that I used to have. And I had done that for long enough. It was time to try a new thing. And there's nothing like being fired to help you try a new thing. And it worked.
Where do you get the inspiration to pull in, I guess, comedy relief in a world so heavy?
I've always found that when I'm bogged down, when if I'm depressed and not getting anything done at my office desk, I'll go out for a run, I'll go for a workout, I'll read somebody else's work, I'll hunt around on Substack to find who's doing funny, interesting things. And, it's very often a matter of you don't like the subject you're on, then change the subject. And the best way to change the subject is mentally. So I will like head off from the desk where I'm sitting now, get out in the world, see what ideas are pinging around out there, And very often with comedy, it's what unusual take can you have on reality. It's one of the reasons why I kind of love AI. Artificial intelligence is the perfect straight man for me, because all that AI is everything that people have already been saying and thinking and doing for the longest time. And if I'm looking for what I need to bounce off of, I can just tell Chat GPT to write up an article about what I'm thinking about at that moment, and there'll be a million comedic moments that come to me out of like that straightforward, super earnest, super boring voice that AI talks to me with. So, between AI and just getting out into the world and, doing a version of stop all the noise, take a look at the world, see what's out there, see what's funny. One way I get ideas come to me all the time. I love to ride my bike, and I put my phone on the handlebars on my bike, and I'm always sending myself text messages of funny ideas I should pursue when I get off my bike and I'm back in my office. So no shortage of ideas. It's just a question of how much longer I'll have. I'll be around to execute them.
Oh, I love that. I get my ideas when I go on long runs as well. I just It's hard to just stop and write it down because I can't write them down as I'm running. I should do the voice memo or something to get because as soon as I get back home, I've lost my ideas.
Yeah, I mean, my watch allows me to send myself text messages when I'm running or when I'm in the gym. I can just, make like Dick Tracy and talk to my two-way what that funny thought that I had was. And, honestly, all I need is that germ of an idea to get me started, to get me back to my iPad with my Apple Pencil in hand, start sketching, start processing the idea that I came up with, and it always becomes better the longer that I work on it. So all I need are those three words, starts the ball rolling, and when I really do the work is at my iPad when I've had the spark and the fire starts to burn.
That's awesome. So, The Road to Elsewhere now reaches thousands of readers. What do you think people are really responding to? The humor, the honesty, or the permission to feel lost and to still keep going?
Yeah, I borrowed the subline for The Road to Elsewhere from J.R.R. Tolkien when he said, "Those who wander are not lost." And I added, "They're on the road to elsewhere." So, we're all wandering souls, trying to find our way in life, whether that's, literally we're wandering. I was in Mexico City last week having an amazing time, and, processing a culture that I wasn't familiar with and a language that I don't know. A million ideas came from that. And I find that wandering, whether it's literal, like I'm in Mexico City experiencing new things, or if it's kind of metaphorical wandering, what am I doing with my life? How do I all that's going on right now? When I'm asking, what the path forward is, and there are, pratfalls and funny stuff that happen along the way. And I think that's what people are responding to in the road to elsewhere is they see another guy who's at times struggling, but also keeping a good attitude about it and having some laughs along the way. And I really think that life can't all be dark clouds. There need to be some breaks of sunlight too, and that's what I try to provide on the road to elsewhere.
Awesome. You took a risk building something on your own after decades in a traditional structure. What fears did you have to face, and how did you work through them?
I think that there's this thing with all writers and artists in general is that there's a kind of I'm not worthy attitude that you take toward it. It's like, well, Vincent van Gogh is great and he deserved to be an artist, but personally, I don't. That's what I hear it all the time. I heard it from myself for a couple of years. I hear it from other artists right now. Um, and I finally learned to just like put all that stuff aside. I'm not saying that I'm the greatest artist in the world, that I'm the greatest, with a pencil in my hand. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily funnier than Dave Barry because he's a very funny guy, but I can only do what's authentic to me, what I find amusing, the sketches that I find funny, and if I can connect with people in spite of my own imperfections, isn't that really the human condition? Is none of us are perfect, all of us make mistakes. sometimes the mistakes are funny. And if you can own them and not get all tangled up in them, then maybe that's the way forward for us, is to acknowledge we're not perfect, but we still have something to contribute. And that's why, I never make any apologies for my artwork anymore. I'm pretty new at it. I've been doing it maybe for the last 4 or 5 years in a serious way, serious comedic way. Um, and I'm learning stuff every day. I'm getting better at it, and there's no reason for me to apologize for any of it because it's just the life I'm living. And if you, the reader, don't like it, there are a lot of other places you could go. Garrison Keeler just came up with a new one. It'll be funny too. Samantha Bee is another one who like haunts the same precincts that I do on Substack. And it's funny for me to think that a late night TV host and I are neck and neck in the humor rankings. Um, it's a great freedom for me to tap into my humor, to find other people who are relating to it. And, that back and forth is one of the things that's great on Substack because people write all sorts of comments about my work. And it's feedback that I wasn't even getting when I was the editor of a magazine that had 20 million readers around the world. It's so personal, it's so direct. And that's one of the reasons why I love being on Substack.
Oh, that's awesome. You've talked about how your work feels playful, but also deeply reflective. How has leaning into creativity helped you process loss, uncertainty, and reinvention, or has it at all?
It's interesting that you asked me that question because a few weeks ago, I contributed a piece to another Substack called the Oldster Magazine, and I called it "The Season of Farewell," and it had to do with all of the goodbyes I'm saying in my life right now. It started when my parents passed away, but also. Seeing my family, my two sons grow up and move away from home, so that I only see them, a few times every year now. Like all of those losses and all of those farewells I've had in life have been very poignant for me. And I wrote an essay about that for the Oldster magazine on Substack, and the response was incredible. It was within a few days, 300 people had asked me questions and reflected on what I was experiencing with my own season of loss. So it's not that I'm just a jokester on Substack. Sometimes there are serious subjects that come up that I feel like I just have to address. And when I can do that in collaboration on very big Substacks like the Oldster magazine, it brings me to a whole new audience, which is great. And it also allows me to connect with people who are feeling what I'm feeling, which that's what community is all about. And I'm really grateful that I have such a great community on Substack.
Oh, that's awesome. For listeners who feel stuck between who they were and who they might become, what part of your journey do you hope gives them courage to try something new?
What really strikes me about my own story is that I had a sense of where I was headed, even while I was still living my old life as a big deal magazine editor. When I started taking those art courses, because there was something talking to me there. So it's not like you need to cut yourself off. I'm going to stop doing everything I'm doing and move to this other thing. I don't think practically that's the way life works. What you do is you've got your regular gig, whatever it is that you're doing now, but maybe there's something speaking in a quiet voice to you is like, maybe you should explore that as well. So in the beginning, it was like I was going on Thursday nights after my work day to my art class to learn more about drawing, learn more about acrylic painting. Had no idea where any of this was going, but I knew that I had that there was something building within me. And time goes by, I get laid off from Men's Health. The pandemic happens. It's like the whole world of publishing that I understood changes, and then that's when I had accumulated enough skills as an artist to augment what I was doing as a writer, and then all of a sudden it came together. But this is a long process, and I don't think people should feel frustrated if it takes a while for them to get from an inkling of something they want to do to the fulfillment of doing it. And I feel like every step along that way is worthwhile. You learn things every step of the way. And then at a certain point, you reach critical mass. You think, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to jump into that full time. And, you're going to get feedback when you do that. Either no one's going to care, or you're going to start seeing some successes that say, oh, okay, this is something that I can do. And if I make these tweaks to my approach, I'm going to have an even bigger audience. So, big things start small. It's okay that they're small at the beginning. You don't know where they're going to lead you, but just by like watching the signs and information that you're gathering along the way, you can build it into that thing that justifies everything that you're doing in life. And I feel like that's where I am, but it didn't happen immediately, and nobody should expect overnight successes that way.
I love that. When you look at your life now, what does being in the black mean to you, creatively, personally, and spiritually?
Well, being in the black means that I'm listening to the ideas and that I'm assembling the skills to convey them to the world. So, it's not like I was in the red before. I was farther into the black financially when I was a magazine editor. Um, as I mentioned earlier, this life isn't as lucrative as what I was doing before, but it's rich in self expression and rich in community and rich in contacts. So when you talk about the spiritual side of it, it's like, I'm reaching out to people in a way that I never did before. I'm getting feedback in a way that I never got before. And I feel like I'm expressing myself in ways that I wasn't able to 10 years ago. Um, that broadens who I am as an individual, as a creator, as a communicator. And that has been one of the huge surprises in my career, but also one of the most gratifying ones as well.
How is your support system through all of these changes?
Keep on hearing from old colleagues, from my magazine and book days, who are saying, Peter, I can't believe that you're doing this now. Um, and I can't believe that I'm doing it now either. But, you know, so I had my colleagues back in the day who I was working with at various magazines that I was at. They were a constant presence in my life. Now it's a different group of contacts that I have. There are other creators who I've run into on Substack who I realize we have a lot in common and a lot of work that we can do together. So I lean on them as my support system in a way that I used to lean on, close confidants in the office. Um, it's all a matter of finding your crew, finding your people who support you, who do what you do, who encourage you, who say, that one wasn't so good, who give me negative feedback too. Like all those things are a part of building my new work life and my new work community. And it's been so valuable and fun. And I miss the old people I work with. On the other hand, I'm really grateful to the new tribe because they're supporting maybe a more authentic version of who I am.
What about your family and wife?
Oh, yeah, it's my wife has some challenges with it because very often she comes into things that I'm writing. So it's like, hey, great news, hon. You're in my Substack post today. And she's like rolling her eyes, thinking, oh my God, what's he saying now? Um, but for instance, this was a funny thing that happened. So you mentioned in my intro that I do a column for the Colorado Sun. So one time I was cartooning about it was the cartoon was called the six people you'll meet at the Denver Nuggets victory parade, which was when the Denver Nuggets won the NBA championship a few years ago. I did a series of funny drawings about all the people who show up when they're extolling a sports team, and honestly kind of making fun of how lame most sports fans are. Well, one of my son lives in Denver and is a big Nuggets fan. So a friend of his forwarded my column to my son to say, "Hey Tyler, you'll find this funny. It's some guy is writing about what it's like to be a Denver Nuggets sports fan." Tyler opened the link and saw that it was his own dad commenting on it. So I'm communicating with my own family through things that I'm writing. And, so far, so good. Nobody has threatened to leave the family, which is a relief.
I love that. So, where can our listeners find your work and follow the road to elsewhere?
They should type in Peter Moore substack.com. My name isn't complicated to spell. It's PETERMOORE. You can see that's my ID at the bottom of the image here. And everything that I do eventually makes it onto the road to elsewhere. And I think you'll know pretty quickly whether or not you're one of those people who should subscribe or you should run in the opposite direction. And I understand both.
Could you explain a little bit on that?
It's like I understand my work isn't for everyone. Sense of humor is about as personal as it could possibly be. And some people might just be annoyed by me and my drawings on Substack, and that's okay. On the other hand, there are 14,000 other people who are saying, "Yeah, I want this thing to come into my inbox twice a week," and a lot of them are writing. Great notes to me in support of what I'm doing. So I know I've got something going here, and it's just a question of whether or not you relate to it as a reader and as a consumer of cartoons. I hope you do. It's a lot of fun for me, and I often get the comment from people, Peter, you seem like you're having a lot of fun doing this. I am having a lot of fun doing this, and my devoted readers are having fun too.
Oh, I love that. So, what advice would you give to someone standing in their own red season, unsure if leaning into creativity is worth the risk?
I don't think there's any choice but to lean into creativity, especially if you're in the red, because that whole thing that was sustaining you before, it fell apart. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the red. So, what you need to do is look around when you're in those red moments in life and saying, what gives me pleasure? What am I best at? What direction should I be heading in now to maximize both my skills and the pleasure I get from employing them? And it doesn't mean that you're going to climb out of the red immediately, but what you might notice is that as you lean into your creativity and you're creating the new life that you want to lead, the red gets a little blacker, a little blacker, a little blacker. Pretty soon your head pops above the red and you realize, oh, this is the world that I was meant to live in. That's where you're headed. But it takes work. And it's the right kind of work because it means it's getting you closer to your truer self.
Very nice. Very well said. Is there anything else that you might want to add that I didn't ask?
Uh, all I would say is that the world is going to try and beat you up and fit you into a straight and narrow. The real fun comes when you're stepping out of that rut and looking at how big and wonderful and interesting the world is apart from what you've been doing. It's a great opportunity. It's scary at the same time. I understand that we all need to put food on the table and roofs over our head, but if you can do that while maximizing your creativity and your trueness to yourself, then that's the way to lead a great life. And I hope for that for everybody who's watching this.
Amazing words said to our listeners. Well, thank you so much. I actually want to go back and ask about your journey into your major titles like Playboy, Men's Health, and Backpacker. How did you always know that you wanted to write for magazines? How did the road into getting into those avenues play out?
I was always when I was in college, I was an English major. People don't do that anymore, but I did back in the day. And I always knew that I had a facility with writing because people have been telling that my whole life. And just the question is like, how am I going to do that for a living? And I can remember at one key point, the first job I got out of college was writing entries for an encyclopedia. So, not the most interesting work, really, but it meant that I had a broad swath of experience coming out of my first job. And it seemed like the next step for me might be to go into magazines. Not that I even knew what that meant exactly, but when I got my first magazine job in New York City, the magazine I was working for didn't mean anything to me particular. It was about kind of a futurist magazine, but I found certain aspects of the job that I was really good at and that could propel me forward in the magazine industry. And it was a series of jobs like that, which was, this job isn't perfect, but there are aspects of it that are really good. So I was three jobs down the line when a friend told me that they were looking for an associate editor at Playboy magazine. And at that time, Playboy was still one of the great magazines out there. So I was kind of full of humility and like, what story am I going to tell them that's going to make them want to hire me? But fortunately, I'd been working for a movie magazine at that time before I went to Playboy. So I played up the celebrity angle on what Playboy does and pitched myself as somebody who could help out in those areas. And, I was 28 or 29 when I applied there. I was one of the younger people to come through the doors in Playboy in a long time. And I think that they were looking for something for me generationally, in addition to the editorial skills that I had. So just the whole idea of building a career is find out what you're good at, find out what people will pay you for, and find out how to connect that with what you most enjoy doing. So I was at Playboy for 9 years, did a lot of striking work there. It made my name in the magazine industry. And then when Men's Health Magazine was looking for a managing editor, it made sense for them to offer me a job, which as I mentioned earlier, I was there for 20 years and did a lot of amazing, wonderful work there, was able to support my family, send those kids through college. And after 2 decades of that, it was probably time to leave, and they didn't make it voluntary for me. They threw me out. I was done. I was laid off. And that was my red moment. But as we've been saying, it was also my chance to determine, okay, if I could create my career on my terms, what would that mean? And I figured that out.
Some people base their identity on their careers, that's who they are. And I've been one to, not base my identity on what I do. So, did you struggle with that, or did you already know where your identity lied in?
Yeah, well, you're a better person than I am because you were able to fend off that self-identification through work, whereas I was absolutely the worst at that. I for the 20 years I worked at Men's Health, I was Men's Health. That's how I took all of my self-worth was I have this big job at this big magazine, reaching 20 million men around the world, 10 times a year, every magazine. We won a bunch of awards. It was like all this stuff. I was telling myself, see, I'm a worthwhile individual because I do this job. And then I got laid off. So, what did all that mean? I mean, it kept me busy for 20 years. It was good employment, but I hadn't dealt with those questions of who am I and what sort of work do I most want to do? And that was part of the dark time I had after I was laid off is, you know, what is important to me? What kind of work will actually please me, you know, in my heart and in my soul? And it took me 5 or 6 years to of trying different things, of looking back at my old magazine career, looking what I wanted to carry forward from that. And until I hopped on Substack, I didn't realize that there was a way for me to communicate my authentic self and build something on what I wanted to express. And I don't have any regrets working for Playboy and Men's Health. They were both great jobs. Backpacker was the same way, and I love to go hiking, so I was very happy to work there and be the editor of Backpacker for a while. But none of them were authentic to who I am, and it wasn't until the industry I was in, went south that I had to look at it and figure out where in the world did I belong. And I'm so grateful that I did figure it out.
A lot of men weren't brought up to talk about their struggles, their feelings, their emotions, their journeys of that nature. They're red and they're in their black moments. So, what would you tell a man who is struggling to find their way, find their voice, and be open to sharing their journey for possible healing or possible growth?
You know, I think what was so important to me, especially after I got laid off from Men's Health, was that I was looking for a new cohort of workmates, people who were going through what I was going through. And I was fortunate at that time with two guys who I had met when I worked for Rodale Inc., which is the publishing company that published Men's Health. Um, they were guys who I'd been friendly with, that I'd been on a lot of bike rides with. We had established a relationship that then continued after all of us were gone from working for the same company. And I really feel like the crucial thing is to find like-minded people, could be men, could be women, who are sympathetic to what you're going through and are also going through similar journeys themselves. So I think a lot of guys, have that lone wolf mentality. I don't need any help. I don't need any support. I don't need shoulders to cry on. Men are emotional beings too. And I feel like for a long time when I was working at Men's Health, I was trying to push that off because I almost didn't feel like I could afford to have an emotional life while I was doing this big job. And a lot was being asked of me. And I had to, you know, keep my focus on the immediate steps ahead and less on what was important to me as an individual. I got laid off, um, and the world went blank for me. And that's when I realized there were all these unresolved questions. And I leaned on these friends that I was mentioning. We still talk to each other every week. We started doing that during the pandemic, but talking about our projects, how they're going, what our hopes for them are, what direction we want to be in. What do you think about this idea? What do you think about that idea? Having a sounding board for what you're doing and what you're going through is so important. Not a lot of guys, or there are many men who don't have that in their lives. And I think what you need to do is seek out those guys who can give you that honest feedback and who can be there for you. And I wouldn't have been able to do anything that I've done in the last 10 years had not my friends been there supporting me and talking to me about what my plans were.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking your time to visit with me and sharing your story.
Great to be here, Araceli. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. If something you heard today moved you, share it with someone you love. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can follow me on Instagram at In the Black Passion Project for more behind the scenes and guest spotlights. And remember, no matter where you've been, you're not behind. You're becoming. Stay in the black.